Hello, let us resume our discussion on the Hollow Man by T.S. Eliot. In my last lecture, I have completed the first section of this particular poem, and now it is the time for the second stanza or the part 2. In my last lecture, I have considered the basic importance about the functioning of the eyes, and there is a kind of a differentiation has been made regarding or between the lost violent souls and the hollow men. That means the persons who have the potentiality to cross the river with direct eyes, and the hollow men who are actually standing just beside the tumid river, that is Achiran, and they do not have the potentiality to meet the eyes with the to meet the direct eyes, to be specific. Now, with this particular incident or with this particular reference, the second section of this particular poem actually continues. It says, "Eyes I dare not meet in dreams." So fundamentally, you will find that this particular description, this particular reference, is being associated with the eyes that have been mentioned in the previous section. That is, the eyes being inculcated, or it may be associated with the eyes of Sharon, and also if you can relate these eyes with the eyes of Beatrice, that means to be associated with the Pro Vita Nova, or maybe something related to Dante or Dantean influence. Now it actually continues that eyes I dare not meet in dreams. So fundamentally the question suddenly arises that what are the eyes that it actually propagates? Now you can identify that these eyes are actually referring to the eyes of Sharon, and it can also be classified, it can also be associated with the eyes of Beatrice, to be specific. And then it says, in death's dream kingdom, these do not appear. Now, in my last lecture, in my last discussion, I have mentioned about the different kinds of kingdoms. In the previous discussion, we have found that is in the first section of this particular poem, there was a particular reference to Death's other kingdom. And I have mentioned that this Death's other kingdom is actually referring to the Purgatorio. That means this is the particular place where the lost violent souls have to come or have to go. It is after crossing the river, the two rivers. The first one is Lide, that is the river of forgetfulness, and the second one is obviously Unoi. That means the river where the soul will be cleansed and the righteousness will come to the forefront. So here it says that the eyes I dare not meet in dreams. So this particular eye is actually referring to one of the hollow men, and they consider that we dare not meet these eyes in dreams even, okay, because we are in death's dream kingdom. So the question is, what does the dream kingdom actually signify? Now, fundamentally, as we have found that the resident, or this particular kind of residence, or maybe the habitat, or maybe the place where the hollow men actually reside, this is the death's dream kingdom. This is fundamentally the wasteland where you can find a particular reference of the spiritual vacuum. Okay, the aridity is being considered. So here it says, in death's dream kingdom, these, that means these are actually referring to the eyes, do not appear. There, not here, but there, the eyes are sunlight on a broken column. So fundamentally, you will find that the sunlight in broken column, this particular reference, it is not simply Eliot is using these kinds of references simply in the Hollow Men, but in the later poems you see that probably it is in Burnt Norton, where the orientations of something positive, the orientations of something related to say something related to the spiritual perspectives being incorporated. There was a particular reference to the brown-aged pool, okay, and then Eliot says that the human mind cannot bear this very much reality. But ultimately here, the particular reference to the sunlight on a broken column, it actually indicates everywhere you can find that in the Christian resources and also in the scriptural sources, sunlight is being always considered as something positive. Now, when it is on a broken column, so a matter of fragmentation is always being incorporated. That is, it is not the complete orientation to something spiritual you can gather. Rather, you can find that the broken column is actually suggesting the typical form of fragmentations that have been taken in consideration here. So it is not in its utter fullness. rather it is incorporating something in terms of the disturbed orientation of some spiritual perspectives. Okay, so here it says that there the eyes are sunlight on a broken column, and then it says there is a tree swinging and voices are in the winds singing. So again, the similar kind of image Eliot actually used in Burnt Norton, and that is the fundamental poem. That is the poem actually. It is taken from the four quartets. Okay, towards the end of Eliot's academic career, Eliot wrote the four poems. It's Little Gidding, East Cocker, Dry Salvages, and Burnt Norton. Actually, these are the names of some places actually Eliot resided. So in that particular poem, Eliot refers to one rose garden where Eliot resided in Burnt Norton. There was a particular rose garden just beside Eliot's house, and the trees were swinging and voices are coming from the school that is just beside the particular place where Eliot actually resided. So fundamentally, what I'm trying to suggest here, that Eliot says that there is a tree swinging and voices are in the winds singing, more distant and more solemn than a fading star. So again, the particular reference of the star, it is very necessary, this is important in Eliot's writing. And here you will find that the star, as we know that in Christian perspective, the blue star, that the reference of the star is always there in the Eliot's aerial poems, that is the Song for Simeon, Journey of the Magi, and Animula and Marina. So what I'm trying to suggest here, the star, or whether it is being associated with the functioning of the blue star that is being related with the birth of Jesus Christ. So star is always being related with something positive. Star is always being related with something that can guide you towards some supremacy, that can guide you towards something related to salvation, because Christ will come and he will bring the ransom. You see, that is the myth of Holy Grail, the other things, as you know, I will not repeat here. But ultimately, when it is the matter with the star that actually indicates the birth of Christ, and at the same time the Christ's birth, it actually signifies that the Savior will take birth and he will certainly save, or cleanse rather, the souls of these cursed men. So ultimately, when it is being associated with the reference to star, then just before that, the particular term fading, this is actually signifying that there was the possibility, but now it is gradually depriving us rather. Why? Because the star is fading. It has become more distant. It has become more solemn. So ultimately, in this particular reference, you will find that whether it is the trees singing or maybe sunlight on a broken column, the voices in the winds singing, which are more distant and more solemn than a fading star, the reference to the star and also being associated with some possibility of salvation, and now it is gradually fading from us. So everywhere you can find that Eliot, though he is projecting, though he is showing us some negative aspects of the society, the present consideration that we are facing here, but ultimately there are some kind of possibility of salvation that he is actually proposing throughout the poems, not only in Hollow Men, not only in the Wasteland, but also you can find that in the later poems that Eliot actually written. So ultimately, whether it is the typical orientations of, say, the aerial poems or maybe the four quartets, everywhere Eliot has proposing or has proposed to some kind of orientations to some spiritual perspectives. Okay, and now here also you will find the same thing is being incorporated. Now I'm reading from Manju Jain. Manju Jain says from line number 20 to 28 actually. Manju Jain says, that is this particular section actually. So Manju Jain says that these lines could mean that in Death's dream kingdom, only the symbolic counterparts of the eyes are encountered as reflections. And here it says that the eyes have been transfigured in the aesthetic landscape of the speaker's imagination. So the eyes are not there, the eyes do not appear. There the eyes are the sunlight on a broken column. So ultimately, it is not the actual eyes that you can experience. Rather, it is the speaker's imagination and the aesthetic landscape that it actually originates. The use of the word there, as I mentioned, it is not here, rather there. It actually distances this particular landscape from the dream kingdom of the Hollow Men. So the possibility is lessening to some extent. This landscape could also be a distilled vision of the death's other kingdom, truly, or the earthly paradise of Purgatorio, glimpsed brokenly from afar, that I've already mentioned. Dante gives a description of this particular earthly paradise or the Garden of Eden. And then there is a quotation. Dante writes, "A sweet breeze, itself invariable, was striking on my brow with no greater force than a gentle wind, before which the branches responsively trembling were all bending toward that quarter, where the holy mound casts its first shadow, yet not so far bent aside from their erect state, that the little birds in the tops ceased to practice their very art, but singing with full gladness they welcomed the first breezes within the leaves, which were murmuring the burden to their songs." Now, Dante is momentarily blinded by the glory of Beatrice, and as we know, and that condition of the sight which is in the eyes but just smitten by the sun. And Dante writes that made me remain a while without vision. This particular glory is only dimly apprehended from afar by the speaker as a reflection of sunlight. The line also suggests the state of mind which Eliot described in his essay of 1934 on Marston, when we perceive a kind of pattern in our lives at rare moments of attention and detachment, drowsing in sunlight. So that is the particular reference that Manju Jain has pointed out. So ultimately here we can find that the possibility was there, but ultimately the particular orientation to salvation is completely missing, because here in Death's dream kingdom it doesn't appear, and ultimately it can be classified in terms of a dream vision that might not be possible in reality, but ultimately it can be reciprocated in the form of fragmentation, in the form of broken images that have been pointed out here. This particular orientation is continuing. Here it says that let me be no nearer. Okay, so that means these are the places, these are distant from the wasteland, distant from the Death's dream kingdom. So let me be no nearer to them, right? Because we do not have the potentiality, we do not have the capability of entering into that particular field, because it is being cast by my imagination. It is not real, it is not being posited to be present, right? And then it says, in Death's dream kingdom, let me also wear such deliberate disguises. Okay, so the disguises and the reference to the masquerades are always being associated, the reference to the role playing and so. These are always taken care of by Eliot in most of his poems and writings. Here it says that in Death's dream kingdom, let me also wear such deliberate disguises. So what kind of disguise does it signify? Rat's coat, crow's skin, cross tabs, in a field behaving as the wind behaves. So generally, the particular image that was dominant, okay, in this particular poem, as I've already mentioned regarding the effigies and Guy Fawkes and so, here you will find that the particular image is that of a scarecrow. And then it says that rat's coat, crow's skin, cross tabs. So ultimately you will find in the fields, in the agricultural fields and cultivational fields, when you will find the scarecrows which are actually standing there, you can find that these kinds of images are there, whether it is the rat's coat or crow's skin or cross tabs. So everywhere you will find the typical orientation of lifelessness, the typical orientation of substancelessness are always being incorporated. So it is not the proper form of life. Rather, you will find that the skeleton has been treated for consideration, and ultimately here you cannot find anything positive. Rather, all the images are creating a kind of alternative life itself. It is not the proper life, rather death in life existence being incorporated with this particular orientation. I am not stating in terms of the mind or psychology or the literal perspective where the human beings are, but ultimately these deliberate disguises, the rat's coat and crow's skin and cross tabs, everywhere you will find that the particular importance have been given on the image of the scarecrow, and all these things are referring to the lifelessness, and these are actually being associated with the Death's dream kingdom. So it is in a field, they are behaving as the wind behaves. So ultimately you will find that the negation of individualism, the negation of individuality is what Eliot actually aims at. When you are behaving as the wind behaves, that doesn't mean that you have some individual thinking. The typical form of thought process, the typical form of your ideology, the typical form of your thinking, okay, everything actually gone to astray. So therefore you are behaving as the wind behaves, you are behaving as the society behaves, you are behaving as the patriarch behaves, you are behaving as the bourgeois capitalist behaves. So everywhere you will find that you have been completely being controlled. The orientation of the puppeteer and the puppet, this particular image can also be classified with this particular reference, behaving as the wind behaves. So the particular lack of individualism that is at the core of the typical modernist society, or maybe the authors who are actually presenting the modern society in the form of their poems or plays or novels or drama, everywhere you will find that somehow the lack of individualism, the lack of individuality, where you have the potentiality of thinking positively, where you have the potentiality of doing something with your own account, all these things have been completely been negated. So therefore, there is the particular reference to no nearer and the dash, and then you can find the typographical gap. So ultimately, it is actually indicating that we cannot enter the death's dream kingdom, death's other kingdom, sorry, because we have to reside in the dream kingdom, and that is completely being different from the other kingdom. We cannot cross the river directly, we cannot face the eyes directly, we do not have the potentiality, we will behave as the wind behaves, we do not have the such kind of individuality that is needed. Okay, so note that final meeting in the death's twilight kingdom. So the reference to the twilight kingdom, as it is being pointed out, it actually signifies that again the particular kind of a juncture when the darkness and light, these come to the closure actually. So the final meeting, when you will think in terms of the final meeting, it can also be associated with the final meeting with the lost violent souls who are just crossed the river and they're standing on the other side, and the hollow men who are standing in this particular side, that is the side of death's dream kingdom. It can be also related with Dantean influence, where you can find on the other side, it can be associated with some kind of purgation, and the reference of the final meeting with Beatrice probably. And at the same time, the final meeting with the lost violent souls, the final meeting with Beatrice, in both these perspectives, these are completely being negated. The possibility is being negated. That is why the not is being presented here. So therefore it says that not nearer, I will not come nearer to that particular place, that is the final meeting place, and that meeting place is being considered as death's twilight kingdom, or rather the twilight kingdom, where the possibility of light is always there, but the matter of darkness is also being there. If we consider that the light being associated with something positive and being related with the with the paradiso, then the twilight kingdom and the complete form of darkness is being regarded in terms of inferno. Then the twilight kingdom can also be related with the purgatorio. Okay, so fundamentally in the second stanza of this particular poem, you will find that these have been spoken, these have been delivered from the mouth of the hollow man, and ultimately they are actually expressing their incapabilities of crossing the river and enter the dead's other kingdom, and the final meeting is completely being negative, because ultimately they are here, they're wearing deliberate disguises, they're wearing the rat's coat and crow's skin and cross staves in a field, and they are behaving as the wind behaves. So this particular fundamental orientation to the lack of individuality and lack of the potency, okay, and the orientation to something spiritual, some spiritual perspectives. So ultimately everywhere in this particular poem we can find that this negation is always being incorporated, and this particular stanza is actually stating that or powerfully. Okay, so what actually happens to the next sections, we will continue in our next lectures. So to wrap to this, thank you.